This month we have been going through greatness, how we seek greatness, how we want to be great, and every time that we move through that space of greatness, we're affected by the ego. The ego always rises. So in the first week, we talked about getting the call from God, and then the ego rallies and says, I got this, God, I can take over. And we all walk through that journey. The second week, we talk about how the ego, when it gets a call from God, the ego then tests God. Well, how about this? Well, how about that? Well, how do I know it's you? And then it has to learn how to follow in faith. The third week, we talked about getting the call from God and then realizing it's a process, that it happens step by step. Everybody remember all of this?
Yes.
Was it fun? Did anybody relate to any of these challenges with greatness? Okay. Well, today I know you're going to relate. So even if every other service was about somebody you knew, this one is, so many of you are walking through this. So today we're going to talk about greatness, but this is not a greatness of helping the masses. This is the greatness of finding your soul. And sometimes that call from God is not as overt as it is in the other OT stories that we've been using. We've been using the Old Testament stories, just so we could talk about them, not us. But today, it's about us. So, sometimes the call from God is very subtle, and it's more a call of love. So, those are the moments when you feel love, and you follow it to the point that you're willing to give up all material support. You're giving up everything that you know. You're following love to find the greatness of your soul. And we all have those pivotal moments where we come to a realization that I have to follow love. Even if it makes no sense to the logical mind, I have to follow love, because if I don't, I will not find myself. I will die if I do not, inside. So, everybody feel how this might be your story too? Okay, all right. All right. I'm going to start with our last Old Testament story. I love the Old Testament. It is a compilation of a history of a people striving to understand God, and in the middle of all the chaos that we've inherited, there are some cute stories, some wonderful stories of personal triumph and behavior. So, we're going to talk about a story of a family that was very poor. They weren't famous, they weren't rich, they were just poor. And as the story opens, there is a man and his wife and his two sons, and they're living in Bethlehem, in what is now Israel. Bethlehem is teensy tiny town. It's no big deal. I mean, it's so small. And they live there, and there's a drought. And so there's no food. So the man, his wife, and his two sons move across the Jordan Valley to a place that is now governed by the Moabites. Now, although the Moabites are actually distant cousins to the Israelites, they don't like each other. So the Moabites and the Israelites have fought for years and years and years and years. One is a descendant from Abraham, the other descends from Lot, his cousin. History fact I know you need to know. But when there's a drought or something like this, the Moabites are more gracious. And so they allow this family to come in because they're starving. So it's not like a hard line is drawn. So the family comes in and they live there for about 10 years, and the boys take wives, and so they're living in this country, and then the father dies and the two boys die. So it's the mom, Naomi, and her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and I can't pronounce her name, the other one. Orpah. So, they're women. There's nothing they can do. And so Naomi says, we have to go home. I have to go home. So she calls in her two daughters-in-law and she says to them, look, I'm going to go to my people where the drought is over. They're having food now. I'm going to go there. You two go back to your families because your parents will take care of you. And remember, this is a societal time when women have no rights, Moabite or Israelite. You are the property of the man. And you're actually negotiated in marriage. You normally don't fall in love. It's normally a contract. And if you don't have a man to provide for you, you're pretty much in trouble. So she tries to send these two girls home. One of them does go home, but Ruth does not. Does everybody know which book we're talking about? It's the book of Ruth. Do you remember this? Okay. So in the story, Ruth does not get a great message from God. She doesn't have this angel stand before her and say, dun, dun, dun. All she knows is that when she's looking at her mother-in-law, she feels that. And she says those very famous words that in the KJV, I'll quote them from there because you know them. She said, I won't go back. I love you. And she says, whither thou goest, I will go, and whither thou liest, I will lie. And thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. And that quote from the KJV has been used in many marriages. But it's the quote of a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. And in that moment, she is saying, you represent the only love I have, and I will follow you. I will go where you go. I will dwell where you dwell. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. In that moment, the love that she had was guiding her into the complete unknown. It's easy to follow love when you're staying in your own house, isn't it? I'm going to follow love, and I'm going to stay in my own town. I'm going to follow love, and I'm going to stay in my own society. I'm going to follow love, and all my people are still around me. But when love calls upon you to go into a space where you have no reference points, I know you've been there. I know you've been there. Where you have to just say yes. I'm saying yes to greater love. So, she wasn't running away from anything, and we know that because of her focal point as the story continues. It wasn't like, oh, at home is a bad deal, I'm going to go with you. Her focal point gets very one. She's focused on one thing. She and Naomi go back to Bethlehem, and everybody says, Naomi! And she goes, oh, it's such a bad life. But Naomi, no, I got nothing. And they live in poverty. She's lost the men in her world. So the two women are living with no food. And as it is in that society, they have fields, and there is a time where they're actually, I believe, harvesting barley. And so, in the story, the reapers are the men who go through the fields and cut the grain. I don't know if barley's a grain, but they cut the grain. And then they have gleaners who come behind the men to pick the little bits that are left. The reapers will actually leave corners of the field for the poor, so they can come and get some food. And so the gleaners are normally women who come behind and pick little by little. Gleaning means to pick little by little. Don't you glean from stories? I gleaned from that situation. I was very fascinated to find out. I gleaned many things. So she joins. So Naomi says, look, girl, this is how it works in this country. I'm going to need you to go out and glean. Get behind the reapers, join the women, and gather some food. Because Naomi's too old. So what does Ruth say? Does she say, let me think about it? Does she say, is there another way? No. She gets up, and she works. And she works from sun up to sundown, following the reapers. Following the reapers. And apparently, she gets to be known. It gets to be known who she is. And at one point, she happens to be following them into somebody else's field. And so the man that owns that field happens to be a relative of hers. He's what they call a near kinsman. We don't know exact connection, but he's a near kinsman. He's riding by, and he says to his boys, who's the girl? And they say, that's Naomi's daughter-in-law, and she's feeding her mother-in-law. She's taking care of her. And this man's name is Boaz. And Boaz immediately says, you tell all those boys out there, do not touch her. She's got my protection. He goes to her and he says, do not go in anybody else's field. You follow my troop in my field. My boys will not touch you. You may drink from their water, the men's water. You may drink You will follow, stay with my girls, and I will take care of you because of what you are doing for your mother-in-law. She served willingly, following the path of love. And because she served, loved, and met her on that path, God put her in the place where someone who was related to her stood forth and took her under his wing. Now, he didn't solve her problems for her. He simply kept her in food. He made sure she was fed. He made sure there was food to take home. We don't know how long the story goes this way, but she is working and investing her energy in doing the job that's before her and following love. So let's pause there. How often does love take us into gleaning in a field where we're having to pick up little pieces behind other people? And we say, this is not my gig, man. I'm not shining my light here. And the universe says, stay there. Stay where you are. We got you covered. This is a new world for you. Your light's not going to shine here. Follow, follow, follow. Do you hear what I'm saying? You've all been there, haven't you? And it's somebody else's field, it's not yours. But you have to have that patience to follow. All right. She was taking care of her mother-in-law, and that is why she did it. When you follow love into a strange world, you have to trust that each step is a part of the journey as it unfolds. So, at the end of the harvest season, it was tradition that the owner of the field, after all the grain's been gathered, you guys understand, and it's put in one place, the owner of the field sleeps with the grain because it could be stolen. So he sleeps with the grain, everybody knows he's there, nobody gives him a hard time. So they know this is going to happen, there's a little party, they know it's going to happen, some of you saw the movie. And Naomi says to Ruth, because he's a near kinsman, I need you to take it one step further, and I need you to trust me. You are to, at night when he sleeps, go lay down at his feet and sleep. Now, in that culture, this is what was going on culturally. The woman has no rights. Naomi actually has a piece of land that she has no rights to. A man has to come and claim it. And in that culture, when you lose your family, a near kinsman can come and marry the female and have a child on behalf of the husband that is dead. And now that inheritance goes to that child. So a lot of men didn't want to get involved in that. Well, I need my own kids to get their inheritance. Do you hear what I'm saying? So when Naomi asked Ruth to lay at Boaz's feet, she was asking her to tell him she was willing to come under his service to become his wife. Because no woman would ever do that. That was her message to him, because he never acted until that moment. He never acted on anything. He protected her. Do you hear me? All right. So she did what the mother-in-law told her to do. She laid at his feet. And when he woke up, he said, what are you doing here? And she said to him, I'm surrendering to you, you the near kinsman. And he said, I'm not the closest one, but I'll take it. He said to her, you could have chosen someone young. We know she's attractive because he had to pull the boys off of her. You could have chosen someone young and wealthy, and yet you picked me, who obviously he was older. He was flattered that she said yes to him. She was flattered that she accepted that gift the universe was bringing her. And then he did what he needed to do to claim her. And you all know the story. He met the other kinsman. You all know the story? He met, well, I'll tell you briefly. He met the other kinsman at the gate where everybody could witness. And he said to the other kinsman, are you going to get Naomi's land? You're next in line. And the guy goes, yeah, I'll take her land. He goes, well, you know, you got to marry Ruth if you do that and have a kid. And then that kid gets to inherit that land. Well, I'm not doing that. And then he said, well, if you're not going to do it, I will. And so the man gave him his shoe. You remember the famous shoe story? This is the shoe story. So the guy who was saying, no, I won't do it, gave the shoe to Boaz, which means I'm not going to do that. So he got him to relinquish, and then Boaz married Ruth. Beautiful story, right?
Right.
Beautiful love story. And it's portrayed as a love story between a man and a woman. But is it really now? We want to think it was a great happy ending. They had children, long life, and maybe it was a great happy ending. Probably it was a great happy ending. But what was the love really about? The love was about knowing her soul. That she was willing to follow that love, which is the love of God. To give up her identity, to invest herself, to help, to provide for the mother-in-law she cared for, to give up everything so she could move into a new world. And love met her there. Love met her there, and love lifted her up there. Does this make sense? All right. This is the story of following love to your destiny. It's not a man saving her. I'm sure when she was gleaning in the fields, she wasn't asking for some man to save her. She was wanting food. It's a love story of following love to your destiny. And she did have at least one son we know of. We know of one son who had a son named Jesse, who had a son named David. She is King David's great-grandmother. And she's not 100% Israelite. King David's great-grandmother. And from her love started the line that he would make famous. In their culture, greatness is about having your name known after you die. That's what the culture was about in that day and time. Whose name is known? Do you know Boaz's name? Whose name do you know? Ruth. You know Ruth's name. She was the tender-hearted one, without wealth, without identity, that followed her heart so she could be an instrument of creating a family line that would go on to rule at least the line of Judah and Benjamin for many years. Pretty cool, huh? The subtle guidance of greatness when it comes from the heart and just asks you to follow. So, she followed a love that didn't promise her anything. How many loves that we follow do promise us stuff? I will love you if, and then you'll do this for me, and then I'll do that for you. And all of our love becomes full of promises and conditions, right? Yes, negotiations. She was following a love that actually asked her to give up everything she knew. And it said, trust me. It asked her to invest herself in a world she didn't understand and to trust that love would be returned to her. Do you think when she gave birth to that little baby, she thought, well, the grandson of this child is going to be absolutely amazing? No. I think she fed him and changed his diapers. I think she just loved him. This is the greatness of our soul. And so I wanted to close our series with this one because all of us have that calling of our heart. And all of us are in those points where we're not as good as them or as good as this or as financially sound as that or blah, 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 blah. We are us. Do you hear me? And when the heart calls you to love and to walk away the heart will call you to walk towards something. The mind says you're walking away. The heart says walk towards something. When the heart calls us to walk towards something, that is when our soul is seeking its destiny. Our soul is seeking to express at a higher level. And in this particular story, we really never saw the ego rise, did we? When she surrendered in that moment to Naomi, that was her surrender of the ego. It never rose in her story. And of course, we don't know exactly all the details of her journey, but in the story we inherited. It's a beautiful story of cooperation and harmony, regardless of the circumstances. This is when the head and the heart become one. The ego serves the spirit. We see the determination of getting up every day and investing in it. Ego is serving the spirit. Take a breath. As we in this modern world seek to rise to our own sense of greatness, we actually walk each of these lessons that we've gone through this month. We walk them all. And we do get the visitations from God, do you not? Your meditations are very clear sometimes. This is what I need you to do. This is what you're to do. And then we get the guidance from our heart as we're following the love. We experience it on every level. But to Christ, to actually become one in the energy of divinity, your soul divinely expressing, the space between the ego and spirit has to become harmonious with spirit guiding. It's so simple, isn't it? And I know now you feel so empowered to go out in the world and love, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, well, let's go within. I want you to breathe and feel a beautiful column of light over you. And I want you in your mind's eye, just let it lift you up. Lifting you into a space of just serenity and peace. Feel the love of God filling that column. And I want you to, in this moment, welcome the energy of Ruth to step forward. The energy of the actual woman. And you can feel the truth in her. But I want you to begin to feel the wonderful strength of spiritual guidance that surrounds her. And if you can, thank her for following her heart, for leaving a wonderful story. And just feel that strength. And as you feel it, feel the strength within you being stimulated. I too am child of God. I too am strong. We're going to let Ruth go, thanking her and letting her go. And I want you just to feel your essence in that beautiful column of light. And in this moment, if you can, in your heart, just say, God, I surrender. I surrender to the greatness that you have for me. The greatness that is in me. The greatness of your love flowing through me. I surrender. And as you do, feel the strength. Feel the strength pouring into you. The strength to glean. The strength to go moment by moment, step by step. The strength to follow love. Feel the energy in that column of light just coming alive and strong. It may be shifting colors, it may be in motion. And feel the great love that you have for God and the great love you have for self. Father, Mother God, I am ready. Turn my light on now. And just feel. Take a breath. Send that love into your world. Let your focus now come back into this room, back into your chair, knowing that light still surrounds you. And when you're ready, you can gently open it. I may walk quietly You may not know what I'm doing, but I walk to my greatness. I'm walking to my greatness. Say yay, God.
Yay, God.